Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm James.
And welcome to the Cornwall Property Podcast, where every week we bring you the latest news, hot topics and guidance around the Cornwall property market.
Stay tuned to be informed, inspired and to have any of your property related questions answered by trusted local property professionals.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Dan and I am once again on my own this week because James is at home with his newborn little lady. So again, it was with just me this week. Thank you again for joining. And this is our Ask Dan and Dan episode in this occasion. So what we're doing here with the Cornwall Property Podcast, if you're not a regular listener, thank you for joining us. We are here to inform, educate, inspire you guys to get involved with property and hopefully make a little dent in helping to solve this whole Cornwall housing crisis and the shortage of housing. So what we have is where this episode is where listeners get in touch with us with questions that they've got, and then we just help answer those as best as we possibly can. So the first question I've got here is from Paul, who is in Falmouth, and Paul has said, I've been wanting to start investing for some time, and your podcast and great content has inspired me to take action. Brilliant, Paul. Great to hear. I'm wanting additional cash flow, so being located in Falmouth, I'm naturally looking at student HMOs. Understood. Is now a good time to get in with mortgage rates where they are? Okay, Paul, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for the kind words and first of all, taking action, which is great. And also, yeah, I completely understand HMOs in Falmouth would be a natural option for increasing cash flow. Obviously, when you're choosing your strategy, your chosen property strategy, you need to be looking at, well, what do I want? Is it capital growth, so long-term growth, or like as a pension pot, most people look at property as, or is it cash flow now? You want something that's going to give you some extra income every month. I'm sure everyone could do a bit of that. So here, Paul, you've identified HMOs because it's an option for extra income each month. Brilliant. Obviously, one things I'd let you know and make sure you're clear about are, with that extra income comes a lot more headaches, a lot more work, a lot more maintenance, because you've got more people living in one place. Obviously, there's possibilities that you may have tenant issues as well with guys that don't always get on. Normally with students, they have one kind of contract in the tenancy, so they have like a lead tenant as such. That may not be as much of an issue. And also, are you going to manage yourself? Are you going to self-manage or get an agent to manage it? I'd recommend getting an agent because it just takes the hassle out of it and the headaches are out of it. But it's also finding an agent that is very reliable, knows what they're doing, and can deal with the workload as well, of course. So answering your question, is now a good time to get in with the mortgage rates? Well, if you listened to the podcast last week, episode 50, mentioned how the mortgage rates have just dropped for the first time, or been now out 8 weeks, and that is good. But what we're finding, because James and I, we have a HMO portfolio as well, and what we're finding is that lenders are actually at the moment far more open, and they're encouraging lending to HMO investment properties. Now they see it, and why? Because previously it wasn't necessarily the case, especially with COVID going on. But at the minute, they're seeing with everything, with the incomes and everything, where they are, the cost of living going up, they see that HMOs are actually a lower risk lending option for them. So we are actually getting the best rates we've got at the minute are actually on our HMO mortgages, because the lenders have a lot more appetite for that because they see it as a lesser risk. Why do they see it as a lesser risk? Well, I imagine because they see it as income coming from lots of different people, then you've got less chance of not being able to afford the rent. So Paul, with regards to timing, I don't think time is a bad time now at all. And if anything, if you wait maybe a little bit longer, as I mentioned last week in the podcast, rates will start going. We've got lenders that we had a rate of 5.5% on the top of my head for a HMO mortgage. We were trying to secure ASAP, but I know rates are starting to get a little bit more attractive again. And as soon as a lender drops, you tend to find the domino effect, the others start to follow. So I think HMO is a good avenue if you're looking for cash flow. Definitely recommend maybe networking with a few local agents who are specialists in the student market, but it doesn't have to be a student HMO. We've got properties that are young professional or just professional HMOs, house shares. And HMO, sorry, I should have said house of multiple occupancy. So essentially, for those that aren't familiar, it's a house where you share. It's a shared house where you've got 3 or more people living under one roof, and they're all from different families. So yes, definitely worth getting in touch. Speak with some mortgage lenders as well. See if they can get some steer on where lenders are looking at the minute, and do they think it's going to get any better anytime soon. But always, and the best time, one quote that always sticks with me, Paul, the best time to invest in property was yesterday. Because look, if it's a long-term game, is not looking for a quick fix, but it looks like you're looking to hold this for some time, then over time, you're not going to lose out on property. It's going to be going up in value. So hopefully that helps, Paul. Any other questions on those answers, please do get in touch and let us know. But I wish you all the very best with that. The second question for today's show is from Eve, and Eve is in Sithians. And Eve says, I am in the process of purchasing a buy-to-let investment property, which happens to have a tenant currently in situ. Okay. The tenant has been in the property for over 2.5 years. The property is managed by a local agent who has been in charge of the property for over 10 years also. I like the idea of buying with a tenant in situ as I will be earning from day one. I believe we have everything covered with regards to buying with a tenant in situ, but wondered if you had any additional guidance I may have missed. Thank you in advance for all your help and the great content. Eve, brilliant. Great to hear you are taking action, and great to hear by the sounds of it. You got offer accepted and you're progressing quite nicely with this purchase and this buy-to-let property. So massive well done. Great to see and to hear even. So brilliant. Things to bear in mind. So you've got a tenant in situ. Tenant has been there for a good couple of years now. You've got an agent managing it by the sounds of it who has been there. Are you going to stay with the agent? Are you going to self-manage? That's probably one question that I'd look at. But with regards to a few things, I've tried to look at what could go wrong, what you need to be aware of. So I've made 5 little points here I was going to share with you. So first thing I'd be looking at if I'm buying a property with a tenant already in situ is I'd be asking for the history, payment history from that tenant. So are they in arrears? Are they all up to date? Really important. You don't want to be buying a property if you know the tenant owes money and they're not paying the rent. Also, that paying on time is key one. So making sure that they're not erratic, so they don't pay one on the 5th on 1 month and then they pay on the 7th on another, and then it's like the 15th on it. You need to make sure that they've got a set payment date and that they're paying on time every time. So that's one thing I'd look at. A second would be see if the rent has changed much over the last few years. If it's market rate, for example, how are you going to do that? Speak with the agent who's currently letting it for a start, looking at comparables, what properties similar to yours are being rented for currently, and you're looking there essentially, am I getting market rent? If I'm not, is it something you want to obviously be increasing? Because then you've got to think about, well, look, depending on how off market rent you are, you might choose to stay at a slight lower rate because it might mean that the tenant stays longer. Or you might think, well, no, I need to be making a little bit more money on this now. I need to be bringing it up to market rate. And you're going to be implementing an increase where you need to just start looking at, well, how big of an increase is this going to be? How are you going to do it? It's not going to look great. As soon as you take over the property, you go and slap a big increase on the rent as well. It might make a little bit of unrest with the tenants. So these are all things that I'd be looking at, doing a little bit more research on. Third would be making sure that you're fully compliant, making sure the property's fully compliant. And again, if it's been managed by an agent, I'd like to think it will be, but believe me, I've seen horror stories where it hasn't. So how do you make sure it's compliant? Making sure the tenancy setup is all on the correct tenancy contracts, making sure the deposit has been protected, making sure the gas safe certificates have been issued to the tenant upon entering taking the tenancy out. The EPC certificates have been all up to scratch and they are at the adequate ratings, and that they've been served and shown to the or issued to the tenant upon taking up the tenancy. So that's another area I'd look at. And another 2 I'd say is, well, also make sure that your solicitor apportions the rent correctly. So for example, if you're buying a property and your completion is on the 15th of the month, for example, the tenant may pay their rent on the 1st of the month. So in essence, when you take over the property, you're going to be due half of that month's rent. So it's making sure you've got an arrangement of, well, how are you going to get your half month's rent? Is that going to be taken off the purchase price? Are you going to be sent that on completion as well as part of the completion statement? So again, that's another area to look at. And the final thing would be to make sure that the tenant, as soon as you do take over the property, that you update the tenants, inform the tenant of the updated payment details. So make sure they got a standing order updated and sent, because there's nothing worse than if the tenant still has the original landlord's details and they're sending the payment to them. It's not as easy to get the money back from that landlord later on. So get on that, be really proactive. If hopefully they're just paying the agent direct maybe, and the agent gives you a statement and pays you. So if that's the way it goes, then great. But if not, definitely get onto that straight away. But Eve, all the best with it. I hope that helps cover a few little things that may not have crossed your mind. And if there's any other questions from the back of that, please do let us know. But guys, that is it from today's episode of Ask Dan and Dan. And yeah, I hope that's given you some value and some content. And should you have any questions property related that you'd like to throw at James and I, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Get in touch via Instagram at Cornwall Property Podcast. On Facebook, send us a message on there also, or you can send us an email at hello@cornwallpropertypodcast.com. Thank you again. That is a goodbye from me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.